here. I didn't get anything thrown at me on the way in, which is excellent. Just wanted to send a big thank you to the Cal Poly Republicans for inviting me. You two. Now, with a topic like women and... Oh, is this on? Is this working? Did it shut off? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. With a topic like women and traditionalism, obviously I'm going to get a lot of flack, as we already saw outside. They had some pretty clever signs. They put me on a poop emoji on one of the signs. Clearly my ideas have just been blown the F out, as people would say. Just totally destroyed. But I figured that because I'm going to get flack from people on the far right saying I'm not traditional enough, therefore I shouldn't even be speaking here, and people on the far left saying that traditionalism is inherently evil, I decided to take to the kitchen and I baked a pie for the haters. Speech, they can come up after, grab a slice of pie, or you can try and offer it to the Antifa outside.
Masks, they can't eat it.
Yeah. Oh, just as I need it, it's gone.
It's Antifa.
Antifa now. Ben is secretly Antifa.
There it is.
There we go. Perfect. Now, on a more serious note, traditionalism is not actually about being chained to a kitchen and making pies all day. This may seem scandalous to say, but traditionalism is actually about women's happiness. And in fact, I made an entire video about it that some of you may have seen called What Every Girl Needs to Hear. And I did the whole thing without mentioning sandwiches once. Traditionalism is beneficial for women for about a gorillion reasons, and none of which that I could say would include because whatever religion says so. There are plenty of secular reasons for why traditionalism is good for women. So let's jump into one of my favorite things, and that would be data, because the stuffy conservatism that surrounds women and how they used to be in roles that we abandoned for twerking is actually something that is backed up by a lot of facts. So let's look at the first chart here. The fewer sexual partners a woman has actually increases the odds of her having a successful marriage later on. Now this is pretty damning stuff. If you look here, if a woman has 0 sexual partners before she gets married, she has a 90% chance, or around a 90% chance, of having a successful marriage later on. That goes down with every single sexual partner she has later on. Once it gets to 21 plus partners, you're getting to the under 20% chance of having a successful marriage and finding a life partner. That is devastating stuff. I don't know, has anyone seen that movie, What's Your Number? Anyone? Okay, one person here. It bombed in the box offices, but basically, it came out last year. It's about a girl who finds out from a Harvard study that after she passes having sex with 20 people, her chances of finding a life partner are done, pretty much. So she tries to go back through all of her exes and date them instead, because her number is 20, so that she can marry one of them and not be doomed. It was a funny movie, but the reality is that these people that are tested in this study are real people that are potentially going to be alone for the rest of their life, die on their deathbed with no one beside them. It's a very, very sad reality. Now, women actually... Oh, there's some more sad data. Now, overall, women are happier in traditional roles as well, and this goes for men as well on this statistic of marriage. Married people, 43%, report being very, very happy with their life versus unmarrieds, which are 24% reported. And that is not all. When it comes to the happiest vocation for women, having children is the happiest vocation out of every job. That's including things like being a professional Instagram model, being a YouTuber. Every woman reported that being a stay-at-home mother made her happier. And the least satisfied here were people in marketing, advertising, and public relations. I apologize, some of you may need to change your degree. And if this hasn't sold you yet, some of you may be thinking to yourself, Lauren, you're a prude. Screw you, I like screwing everything. I don't care about getting married. You suck. Well, if that's the case, then I actually have some news for you, because traditional values benefit you as well if you just want to screw everything, because the effects of promiscuity on how much you enjoy sex are pretty damning as well. the more traditional a relationship is, statistically, you have more sex and better sex. And don't take my word for it, most of the reports are entirely self-reported by women, and in fact it works for men as well. In this case, you look at results indicate that for every additional premarital sexual partner an individual has, not including the marital sexual partner, the likelihood that they will say their current marital sexual relationship is extremely satisfying versus only being moderately satisfying goes down by 4%. And for men, it goes down by 5.3%. So basically, you have the option of having tons of extremely mediocre sex with lots of people, or extremely great sex with one person and having a meaningful, lasting relationship. It kind of seems like a bit of a no-brainer. And I'm not even done with how much traditionalism improves your sex life. If you are sexist in your relationship, your sex life is allegedly better based on statistics. Sorry guys, it's just a fact. So they found that when women do more chores like doing the dishes and doing the laundry, and men do more chores like taking out the garbage or repairing the sink, couples reported having a happier sex life. So traditionalism, statistically, better for your marriage, better for your happiness, and better for your sex life. Sorry, where am I? Here we go. No problem. that just snuck in there. I don't even need that one. Basically, girls, if you want the best shot at happiness in your life and want great sex, marry well, marry young, and do the laundry. Guys, you have a little more time with this and a little more room to mess up statistically. As Frank Sinatra will put it, men tend to age more like fine wine, as George Clooney did. Now, they have this saying where they say men tend to be born poor and die rich, and women tend to be born rich and die poor. And that's all based on the fact that women tend to be valued based on their fertility. They tend to be valued based on their beauty and youth and these such things, whereas men tend to be valued on how much money they make and how successful in their status of power. These kind of things go up with age, whereas things like beauty and fertility go down with age. So you have to have some sort of responsibility from both sexes. Men, these statistics do affect you less when it comes to being with tons of people before marriage. You're still likely to have successful marriages even if you've been with tons of people. However, there still has to be responsibility from both sides to have overall lasting happiness. Now, all this stuff that I'm talking about, all these statistics that lead to happiness, great sex lives, and all these things, are in the realm of something called traditionalism. They are wisdom of the ages that people pass down so that their children and grandchildren will have successful lives. But this wisdom has been forgotten. Femininity used to be something that we celebrated. You look at in history, goddesses like Venus, they were held up as the stunning image of fertility and beauty. Or you look in Christian iconography, you had the Virgin Mary was held up. And ever since we stopped holding up femininity and women's happiness, we started embracing feminism. And since then, well, what's happened to women's happiness? It has been on a steady decline, and we can't figure it out. We can't put two and two together for some reason. Secular research has been confirming what every religion in the world has already known for a millennia, and we are still not listening. So people here may be wondering, if traditionalism is so good, if it's this great thing that has caused for women to be very, very happy, and when taking it away causes for them to be depressed, why on earth have we abandoned it? Why are we not sticking to these traditional values? What could possibly make feminist land whales with infected piercings and armpit hair more appealing than the traditional and the feminine? So how did this happen? Because Darwinism does not support the survival of the blue-haired social justice warrior. These are literally a breed of people that think it is problematic to pass on their genes. So Darwinism does not support their existence. It doesn't make sense. And in the long term, it doesn't make sense, and this is why the West is dying, because we're creating a generation of these people who don't even want to pass on their genes. So the answer to how did this happen is it happened through deceit. And that deceit came in the form of the politics of envy and destruction that we know as Marxist feminism. And this brings me to one of my favorite comments on my YouTube video that I did a while ago on traditionalism and feminism. Right here. Alright. Marxist propaganda. Really, Marxist effing propaganda. Tell me, Lauren, what the F does Marxism have to do with any of this? Marxism, a form of communism, has nothing to do with feminist SJW propaganda. Or are you saying anyone to the left of you is Marxist? I swear you people are such hypocrites. You hate how SJWs water down terms like racist, sexist, Nazi, fascist, rapist, but you yourself water down the word Marxist. Practice what you preach, please. Of course, YouTube comments always have to have such colorful language and be so kind and articulate in the way they present their points, but despite that, it is still a totally legitimate question. What does feminism have to do with Marxism, and what does Marxism have to do with traditionalism? The answer to that is everything. Feminism has been Marxism since the very beginning. Woo! We need to stop with some of the more superficial critiques we've been making of feminism because, quite frankly, at this point, anyone can debunk the wage gap. It's simple math. At this point, it's so easy to debunk their logic. I think there's over 1 million videos just debunking feminism on YouTube right now. It's time to understand the motives behind their apparent stupidity and to see the bigger picture here, because socialism, feminism, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ propaganda, the free love movement from the 60s, and globalism, these are all not distinct entities. They are branches from the tree of Marxist thought. And they're all based on fomenting class struggle. They are based on the narrative of the oppressor and the oppressed. And they are all politics of envy. Marxism's long march through our institutions has been aimed at subverting tradition at every turn. Marxism has actively been hostile towards the ideas of meritocracy. Marxists have encouraged children to rebel against their parents, students to rebel against their teachers, ignorance against knowledge, weakness against strength. At the lowest level of social organization, subverting tradition meant subverting the family unit itself, pitting wives against their own husbands. And of course, modern Marxist feminists have taken this even further. If destroying the patriarchy represented splitting the atom, then the postmodernists are bent at destruction at the subatomic level. To the postmodernist Marxist feminist, truth itself is considered an instrument of oppression. You look at the idea of hate facts. They will not stop until excellence has been stamped out and until order undone. Women are now being told that the very act of childbearing is oppressive. If you look at Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex, she says that motherhood leaves a woman riveted to her body, like an animal, and made it possible for men to dominate her and nature. So, for these feminists, it wasn't enough to just pit women and men against each other, to pit wives and husbands against each other. They had taken to setting mothers against their own children. And not just that, abortions were not enough for them. The incubator of life, the womb itself, is an oppressive thing. And this is a leader in feminist Marxist thought. Let me borrow liberally from socialistworker.org's January 31st, 2013 article. I'm sure that the International Socialist Organization won't mind me borrowing from them because they don't believe in property anyways, so. All right. Inessa Armand, the first leader of the women's department of the 1917 Russian Revolution, said, "If women's liberation is unthinkable without communism, then communism is unthinkable without women's liberation. Marxist tradition has, from its beginnings, with the writings of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, stood for the liberation of women. As early as the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels argued that the ruling class oppresses women, relegating them to second-class citizenship in society and within the family. The bourgeois sees in his wife a mere instrument of production. The woman was degraded and reduced to servitude. She became the slave of his lust and a mere instrument for the production of children. If he kills her, he is only exercising his right," said Engels. Moreover, Lenin continued with this narrative, saying, "In order to change the conditions of life, we must learn to see them through the eyes of women." Lenin also commonly referred to women's oppression within the family as domestic slavery. So, motherhood and being a wife is domestic slavery. According to statistics, apparently a lot of women like being slaves. Kind of kinky. These are the leaders of Marxist thought. These are not some random nut jobs. They're just very, very famous nut jobs. And these are the words from their own mouths. The talking points of domestic slavery. of rape culture and of women being chattel have been established for a very long time. They did not come from the depths of Tumblr, as some of us may think they did. These have been established through communism and Marxism, and we just don't usually discuss their origins in schools. In fact, they're usually hidden from us. And these thought leaders said that communism is inextricable from feminism. So based on that, we can deduce that feminism is for everyone and that patriarchy hurts us all. Where have we heard that before? Marx and Engels have kindly provided us with all of the concepts that we need to create intersectional feminism, and it is not even 1920 yet. So, in 1920, Trotsky had firmly established gender equality as a battleground. In order to achieve the actual equality of man and woman within the family is an arduous problem. All our domestic habits must be revolutionized before that can happen. And yet it is quite obvious that unless there is actual equality of husband and wife in the family, in a normal sense as well as in the conditions of life, we cannot speak seriously of their equality in social work or even politics. Viva la revolution. If you've got an appetite for this kind of stuff and want to go beyond pedestrian 1920s Marxism and get into state-of-the-art postmodernist stuff, check out The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, The Scum Manifesto, and Sexual Politics by Kate Millett. If you are a fan of degeneracy, you're in for a real treat. But this very long-winded point is that when people say that Marxist thought and cultural Marxism is influencing all of the problems we are dealing with today, they are not just making stuff up. All of these words came from the mouths of the leaders of Marxist thought and postmodernist thought. And they have been saying this for a long time. They set up all of the conditions to create modern feminism and to deconstruct the family. So now that we know where all of this nonsense started, the deconstruction of the family and of logic itself, in my opinion, and and you are aware of the ratio of far-left protesters to even just moderately right-wing protesters, you likely understand how these ideas spread so quickly through our institutions. If you look at this, liberal professors outnumber conservatives nearly 12 to 1. And I put another graph over here, which is actually a very scary chart. A breakdown of the commencement speakers of the top 100 universities. I thought originally that that green part was conservative speakers, but no, that's just affiliation unknown. The red 9% is conservative speakers. The 67%, all liberals. So our institutions have been completely controlled by people that buy into this kind of postmodernist leftist thought, which is how it spread through young minds so quickly. So tenured radicals made their way into our education system and have been pumping young kids full of Marxist thought in the name of feminism, socialism, equality, or even just kindness. But the background of these terms that professors use as excuses for their indoctrination is far more sinister than it sounds, and obviously comes from an ideology that has been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions of people, that being communism. And quite frankly, it is an ideology that has no interest whatsoever in the well-being of women. But instead it has the motive of constantly pushing the narrative of oppressed and oppressor. As they did with the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, they do with the man and the woman, they do with the trans and the cis, they do with the black and the white. It is not hard to put the pieces together that all of these movements are linked. So what's next for these Marxists? Well, in the near future, these Marxist radicals are planning a summer of violence. All of July 2nd rather, all across the country, they are planning anti-Trump riots. After all, we are the fascists that need to be stamped out by the Marxists, and they need to eliminate us by any means necessary. The internet, luckily, has weakened their monopoly on historical narrative, and people are waking up to ideas beyond egalitarianism and nihilism. So since these people cannot win the war of ideas, violence is their only recourse. Expect them to keep attacking truth in the name of fighting hate, ending sexism, fighting xenophobia, and of course, expect to hear lots about bashing the fash. Now, at the institutional levels, Marxists will continue to forcibly rewrite history in an attempt to orphan us from our past. America is never great, we will repeatedly hear in our classrooms. There is no such thing as a French culture, according to France's new president, Emmanuel Macron. You will hear that repeated country after country. America was built on the backs of slaves. You'll hear that one a lot as well. They will continue pushing these narratives at schools, colleges, and universities. History is the constant march of liberalization, and liberalization is progress. There is a reason that they call it progressivism. And they will keep telling us that any form of oppression is bad, even if that alleged oppression increases the living standards of the oppressed. To wit, European colonialism was a godsend for nearly all colonized people, but you'll never hear that from Marxists. The allegedly oppressive institution of marriage created the happiest, healthiest, most peaceful societies, but you will never hear that either. The message is relentless. Traditionalism is bad, it is outdated, because it is the current year. And they're not going to have much else to say about that. These people will also enact economic genocide through control of the financial system. Everything you need to raise a family continue to get more expensive. Housing, education, healthcare, everything that enables a single promiscuous lifestyle will continue to get cheaper. iPhones, fashion accessories, abortions, this is all strategically planned out. And last but not least, these people will try to destroy our cultural traditions by importing invasions of immigrants who do not share our culture. So how do we compete with this? Well, we compete with this by constantly reminding ourselves of who we are, lest we forget, again, that there is indeed a French culture. America was built in the European tradition by the engine of American ingenuity, and Europe is not just a massive land. These things are important to remind ourselves because they are constantly being stamped out of us. And while the Marxist elite continue to push their Marxist agenda on us, I can assure them, while they may have the institutions right now on our TVs, the right will always at least control the memes of production. And with humor and wit, we have already managed to create an entire movement destroying their programming. Humor has always been a great vehicle for distributing knowledge. And with our wins on this battleground, young people are becoming ever more skeptical of Marxist thought every single day. And I also truly believe that we will compete with Marxist wealth redistribution that is happening within all our governments right now. Oh, that's an important one. With things like cryptocurrency. I actually just bought a ridiculous amount of Dogecoin the other day for no particular reason. If you have no idea what I'm saying right now, I'm probably not the best person to give a speech on central banking and the Federal Reserve, but I would definitely suggest familiarizing yourself with its history if you have the attention span. Definitely check out the book by G. Edward Griffin entitled The Creature from Jekyll Island, and if you're a bit less patient, search for a YouTube cartoon called The American Dream. And while we continue to compete with this far-left agenda through memes and increased financial independence, we will also expose their cognitive dissonance. We can see that the world isn't what they tell us it is. It can't be, because what they claim as truth is not even internally consistent. Gender is a social construct, but transgenderism is real. Transgenderism is real, but transracialism is not real. Race is a social construct, but being white is inherently a bad thing. It's getting a little confusing. Truth is subjective, but anything that doesn't bolster their narrative is both objectively wrong and objectively hateful. None of this makes any sense. So we can simply point and laugh while they lash out in rage. The emperor has no clothes is a hate fact to them. Their positions are indefensible with logic, so they shut down intellectual discourse with pyrotechnical hysterics and hypnotic mantras. And they will continue to repeat them over and over and over again every time they are asked a real question. Diversity is our strength, diversity is our strength, diversity is our strength. And despite all of their awareness, allegedly, they do not have a sense of humor. Because in order to have a sense of humor about the world, one must be in touch with its nature. And there is no one more out of touch right now than the global elite and the virtue-signaling political class. Now, we already are in the process of using some of these methods to compete with the dogma of cultural Marxism. And I think it is a good time right now to remember our victories that we've had against them, because we have had a lot. First of all, Pepe, who started out as a sort of meme against political correctness, was declared an enemy of the state by Hillary Clinton. And Pepe's original creator, Matt Fury, recently killed him off in the comics in a desperate last attempt to reassert control over what he believes to have become a symbol of hate. Yet, of course, no one man can kill Pepe, and right-wing frog memes continue to live on stronger than ever. You may have heard that recently a paper was published to great acclaim in the social sciences journal called Cogent Social Sciences. It was called The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct. Among the claims made in this most esteemed paper were that manspreading is akin to raping the empty space around men. The conceptual penis is abusive toward women and gender marginalized groups, and the conceptual penis is responsible for climate change. That's right, the conceptual penis is responsible for climate change. Now, Marxists thought this was great. This was a wonderful piece of acclaimed work, until they found out the entire thing was a hoax. And now they're decrying it as hate speech. Of course. The big victory is that they cannot stop our ideas. They cannot stop our humor. We are defeating them at every turn, especially when it comes to social media. And when it came to Berkeley, we are even defeating them on the streets. The reality was that we were able to speak truth there without being shut down. And we did not incite violence, but we did not back down. And the battlefront of ideas did not become their safe space, and we will not let it. Also, we must remember that to these people, everything is racist, everything is sexist, everything is offensive. Everything they don't like is a hate fact. Even if they can no longer muzzle us, they will continue to remind us of this every day with their names and their signs and their poop emojis outside. Which is why, over the past year, we decided to completely reject their framing overall. We label ourselves deplorables with pride. We will not be concerned with their racist accusations or their sexist accusations, which came from, were literally invented by Marxists. These words have no meaning to us anymore. We are no longer their useful idiots. These are just a few of the many, many victories we have had in the past couple of years against Marxist thought. But I will say that memeing, regaining financial control, and exposing hypocrisy of these Marxists is far from the most important thing that we can do to defeat their dogma and win this culture war. In fact, even with wins in all of these categories, we will still lose if we do not regain control of our own lives and our own relationships. And this brings me back to my original point on the topic of the traditional woman. We will lose as a society if we do not gain control of the traditional family, for they and the children they create pave the future. Reasserting control of traditional and logical values in our own lives will have the single greatest impact on the world. Because it is easy enough to post online all day about how other people are silly and wrong and how politicians need to fix things for us. But truly the best thing one can do is to make independent decisions to pursue responsibility in your own life and to promote it in your community. So while we can celebrate our wins, I'm going to change from that one. I don't want the penis thing up there anymore. So while we can celebrate our own wins so far, we must reassert the values that built the West and every other society worth a damn. And no, traditional values are not second-wave feminism. They're not first-wave feminism. They aren't any form of feminism at all. It's time for us to abandon this fetishistic, suffocating religion of equality that we have. Men and women are different, and any talk of equality between them is a lie, it is a myth, it is a hoax. We have different biology, that is a fact, we have different brains, and we have different roles in our lives. And we need to come to terms with them and our respective purposes. This means a return to traditional marriage. Instead of giving every 16-year-old girl the go-ahead to sleep around with the whole basketball team, why don't we promote things in their life that makes them happy? Which means throwing out the Cosmo magazines and educating children in the facts of sex and happiness, and hoping they can have meaningful, lasting partnerships in their future. When told we should study or get a job to have a more successful life, we don't start screaming about how it is our right not to do that. Of course you have that right. It's just not a very clever idea. We as a society must translate this attitude towards our relationships and our gender roles and our sex life. Because, well, these things like rights are important, we still have responsibility. And these things are just as important as our careers, if not more so. So we should take the same careful processing and planning that we do in these other aspects of our life. And for women, yes, this does mean embracing roles as wives and mothers. Now, we're getting to the part of the speech where I know some people are going to get pretty mad with me. The pie is here, if you need it. And I'm sure a few people in the crowd are already thinking up in their head how they're going to stump me by telling me, Lauren, you're not pursuing a traditional life, you've got a job, what are you doing? You're right, but I would be stupid to look at all these statistics, all this data, and not plan on having kids myself. I do, absolutely. Girls, there's no purpose more noble than motherhood. And I'm so sorry that people have cheapened our calling and have turned generations of women into zombieless cat ladies. Sorry, zombified cat ladies. Just statistically speaking, a woman would be hard-pressed to find a more important or satisfying role than motherhood. This isn't even me speaking. This is science, guys. And for those in the audience who are thinking, I am the exception, every girl was taught growing up that she was the exception. And we were taught that this was our own idea, that we were the exception. The reality is that betting on the exception is usually not the best way to plan one's life, especially when it comes to something as meaningful as your future happiness and relationships. Women, for their happiness' sake, should embrace our native spheres of influence. Biologically, we are not as well built as men for the type of shallow transactional relationships required for statecraft. On average, our calling is within the domestic realm, where we offer warmth and compassion to our families. Traditionally, I'd say there's a reason why women, despite all of our social programming and all the subsidies to be like men, we still gravitate towards social sciences and psychology in universities. And no matter how much we are subsidized not to do so, we do it anyway. Traditionally, women have had a hand in building society from the bottom up by instilling their compassion and values into children. The compassion that acts as the counterforce to the cold, often brutal justice and logic of the masculine world, which unfortunately, of course, is a dying thing as well, but that is a whole other speech. The entire balance of feminine and masculine complementing each other has been thrown off, and we must find that balance again. Because if we don't have functioning families, we will not have a functioning society. And many of you have probably been indoctrinated into not wanting kids. I know if you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said I didn't want kids and I wanted to be prime minister. But in order to survive as a culture, we must return to putting long-term needs of society ahead of our immediate and fleeting primal urges. Family before self. The values of the West must be elevated above our petty narcissism. We as a society must learn to practice restraint instead of capitulating to animalistic impulses. Do what feels right. It's natural. I don't see the harm in it. Are all lazy rationalizations for short-sighted hedonism. Yes, I absolutely believe in freedom, but I don't believe in promoting stupidity or a path that I know will lead to the death of the culture that I love, especially the culture that allows for this freedom to be possible. And the type of society that we are encouraging right now, not you people in the room, but of course wider society, is based on hedonism and destructions of facts surrounding gender and relationships. It is a transgression against nature that, whether one likes it or not, is not going to last. History knows of no civilization born out of sexual liberation, but it knows of many blown apart in its tempest. Whether you consider the Bible to be allegorical or literal truth, the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah served as a dire warning for us. We know how this ends. Before Rome was overrun by barbarians, it was weakened with no-fault divorce, sexual liberation, and rampant degeneracy. So either we return to the values of traditionalism that made the West great again and made us happy, or we cease to exist as a civilization, and that starts with the traditional woman. On a lighter note, we will continue egging on Marxists, We will microaggress without mercy. We will troll their sacred journals. We will create the dankest memes filled with the most hateful of hate facts. We will pursue truth. We will trigger an intellectual climate-changing global snowflake meltdown, the likes of which the world has never seen. And we will inflict subversive levels of butthurt and shame. And while trying to save the West together, we will have goals never before considered possible. Godspeed and praise Keck.